Hi, I'm Danny. I'm an audio engineer, and I'm currently in quarantine just like everybody else. And I'm trying to make some videos with some information that I wish somebody explained to me when I was a lot younger. And I sort of had to find out on my own by doing lots of Googling and researching and asking questions from mentors and stuff. So these videos are sort of for me when I was younger, or any of you that may get some use out of them. So today, one of the things that I wanted to cover was Pultec style EQs. For a long time, I didn't really understand what they were, why they were so sought after, especially when I was just getting into audio. So today, using Q Capture and Q Clone, I'm going to also show you a visual of what a Pultec EQ is doing. I find that for a lot of younger engineers, including myself, we've kind of grown up in this very visual medium, and we're all used to working on iPads and stuff now, so it kind of helps to have the visual. Obviously, don't mix with your eyes. It should be, if it sounds good, it is good. But sometimes having a visual can kind of confirm some things you might be thinking. So cool. Let's look at a couple Pultecs that I have. First one we're going to look at is the one from Avid, which I personally prefer, and I think it sounds a little bit sweeter and a little bit nicer. And then I also have the Waves Pultec, which has a slightly different sound, which I'll also be able to show you, which is kind of cool, using Q-Clone. So let's check that out. So here's my screen. So this is Q-Clone right here. So on this demo track I have right here, I have Q Capture, which is basically generating a signal, and then you feed that back into itself using bus 27 or whatever bus that's the one I had available. So then on the secondary track right here, you put Q Clone and you turn on capture so that you can see what's happening. So I first have this Avid Pultec pulled up, so I'm going to unbypass it and let's see if anything changes on Q Clone. Okay, so we just by turning it on, I haven't adjusted anything yet. We had a little baby dip in the low end. Let's see, bypass it again. You can see it move. So even though I haven't touched the plugin yet, just by inserting it, it's already starting to change something. Here, let me make the scale a little bit smaller. You can see the change even more there. So with Pultecs, you can kind of think of them as like two triangles, and then like another band or something like that. So the first triangle is an upside down triangle. I have a very squeaky chair. I don't know if you heard that, but there'll probably be plenty of that while I'm trying to show you guys stuff. So the first triangle is an upside down triangle right here, and it's based around the low frequency. So you can select 20 hertz, 30 hertz, 60, or 100, and you can boost or attenuate, or both, that frequency, which I'll show you in a second. Then there's another triangle right here, and that's your high frequency, and you can boost it, and you can select your Q, and Q is bandwidth, so that is how wide the EQ point is, which we also will be able to show you. Lastly, there's also an attenuation band or filter, where you can select your frequency, and then you can attenuate it. So, still looking at all of that, let's see what happens if I start to boost at 60 hertz. So keep an eye on Q Clone. So I am now boosting a fair bit, and looking at Q Clone, you can see that even though I'm on 60 hertz, this is right about 60 hertz right here, and there's a pretty big, pretty generous boost happening, right? So there's that. So these are pretty significant, EQ moves that you're doing. These are pretty big moves. So let me pull that back. And then let's attenuate at 60 and see what happens. The same amount. So you're basically dumping everything below 500 when you pull something out like that. Like that is a huge, like that is a significant move when you do that. So that's a pretty good visual for, some of the broad moves that you can make with a Pultec. One of the cool things about a Pultec as well is you can boost on a frequency and then you can attenuate that same frequency. And they interact differently when you do that. So if I am on 60 hertz right now and I boosted at 5 and I attenuate at 5, what starts to happen is that you get this bump and then you get a dip. And the dip seems to be right around 1K, which is kind of cool. So using the boost and the attenuator on that same frequency, you can actually cut some mid-range. So I can boost, a ton of 60 hertz. And you see, as I start to do that, that mid-range cut also seems to like tilt and reacts. So I can boost a ton more and attenuate a ton more. And that cut seems to move and also it gets deeper. So even though I've only selected 60 hertz right here and I've boosted it and I've attenuated it, look at this crazy EQ that has, become from that. It's pretty crazy. And you can do some powerful things with one frequency, right? So to me, that's a really cool thing. And a lot of times, especially in rock and pop music, sometimes you go for sort of a smiley face kind of EQ where you end up boosting some lows, cutting some mids, and boosting some highs. And that happens a little bit in those genres of music, some other genres as well. You have to be careful with it, but generally that's like adding excitement and adding power. That's sort of what happens. And just with the Pultec alone, if I selected, we'll boost 10K and we have a wide or a medium to broad bandwidth. If I boost 10K, let's see what happens. So there you go. I've boosted a frequency and I have boosted and cut another frequency, and this is sort of the curve that's happening, which is kind of interesting. So let's bring this down. See if that works. Yeah, option click, return them to their normal state. And then we also have our attenuator right here, which is it was on 10. Let's put it on 20. And I'm going to pull this attenuation down. Let's see what happens. Sort of what you thought, right? So I know some friends of mine, and I kind of got this from one friend of mine. He'll use these on guitars because you can do some pretty specific cool things to a guitar. So let's say you have some sort of distorted guitar, and it might have a little bit of hiss, a little bit of buzz in it or something. Using the attenuator, you can kind of bring some of that down, and then maybe you want it to cut through a little bit more, so maybe you boost a little bit of 4K, something like that, and then maybe it needs a little bit more body, so you like boost a little bit at 100. See, that's pretty broad though. So maybe you also cut a little bit at 100, maybe a little less, and obviously this would be, I would be listening to it, but I'm just kind of showing a little bit of what you can do. So with just this little bit of control, you can do all of these very interesting and usually very cool sounding EQ moves. So this is Pultec flattened out, and this is the shape of what it's doing when it's on, and that's the Avid Pultec. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Okay, you can see it flatten out again. Now let's go ahead and pull up the Waves Pultec. So here it is. And, excuse me, this is the Waves Pultec. So I'm going to go ahead and unbypass it and look what happens to Q-Clone. So it just being turned on creates a good bit of boost. So even though the gain is set to 0 and then the EQ is on, just unbypassing the plugin, it basically turning on the plugin, it's doing something. So this plugin has a sound even when you're doing nothing to it, which is very similar to how real Pultecs work. So if you were to send a signal through a Pultec and not touch anything, it is a tube EQ. It's going to have a sound. So sometimes people will just run things through them in order to get that tube sound. So same operation, upside down triangle right here. You can boost or you can attenuate your frequency. And then you got your normal triangle right here. You get your bandwidth, your boost, your high frequency. And then you have your attenuation knob and your frequencies right there. And this one seems to have a basically an analog noise selector that I always keep off. That will add different styles of buzz and hum to your sound. So it works the same way. So you can boost. So boost to 5 like we did in the last time. You see another very broad move. Attenuate to 5. We're on 100 hertz right now. You can see it starts to cut the mid-range a little bit. Let's go back to 60 like we used to be. Cool. And then let's go back to 5 and 10K, and let's boost a little bit more. And you're seeing where I'm going with this, and you can attenuate at 20 again as well. So you can do all sorts of things. Awesome. So there you go. So that's sort of a visual of what a Pultec is kind of like doing. If having the visual helps, I think a lot of times that can be a good thing to at least have or have seen, so that when you maybe you think more visually, you can know that I kind of want this to happen. I know something's going off in the mid-range that I want to fix. How can I do that in a maybe broad, not very surgical way? And Pultecs can be a great way to do that in a very warm and very sweet sounding way to do that. So let's hear what that kind of sounds like. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of all this. And we're going to listen to a drum part from a song. This is a song by a band called Remember December. These are some tracks that I downloaded from MT-Cambridge, which is a website where I get a lot of free multi-tracks for educational purpose. If you want to practice mixing or practice, things like what I'm showing you, that's a really great place to get some pretty awesome multi-tracks to play with. So anyway, this is sort of a pop punk song. I think this was recorded like 2012 kind of thing. It's kind of got like a Paramore-esque vibe. So I have a Pultec right now inserted on the drum bus. So I'm going to go ahead and bypass that for now, and we'll listen to the drums real quick. The drums were recorded kind of strangely. The kick came and it had a good deal of noise in it, and the snare was already a trigger. So I went ahead and I replaced a lot of those drums with samples that I thought were more pleasing. So you'll probably hear a little bit of a slightly mechanical performance because of all the triggering and stuff like that. But for the sake of audio, I think this is a good example. So let's hear these drums. Alright, and I'm going to insert this Pultec with a little bit of a top boost. That's in. Out. In. So let's take a little bit too far. That's funny, I never noticed that. It goes to 11. That's cranked. When you turn it off, it sounds a lot darker now. Let's go back to a sort of slightly less extreme. So you remember the visual of how broad Pultec EQs can be, right? So that's not just 12K that I'm turning up, right? It's pretty generous EQ. If I wanted it to be a lot smaller, I could turn this to sharp. And you can kind of hear what happens, right? Very specific EQ point. Let's see what happens if I move the frequency while I do that. That at all. All right, so go back to that broad move. That's off. All right, I think I like that. Cool, let's see what happens if we play with the low end a little bit. Awesome. Cool. So that's a little bit of the way that I'm using a Pultec. So I use Pultecs for broad moves. Generally, if I want to basically push something in a direction, I want this to be brighter. I don't necessarily, need to cut something very specifically that's ringing. For that, I would use a more surgical EQ. Perhaps, FabFilter has an incredible EQ called Pro Q3, where you can very surgically remove things or boost things. But with Pultecs, you're usually going for a vibe or a tone, and you're trying to add some sort of warmth, or you're trying to push it in a direction. So you're trying to warm it up. You're trying to, maybe pull a little bit of high end out and add some low end, or you're trying to, push it towards the bright side. So you're trying to push more high end into it, and that kind of thing. So you're usually making a couple broad moves in order to create tone, and get a vibe out of something. Pultecs are awesome. I have 2 analog Pultecs from Clark Technic that are pretty inexpensive as far as Pultecs go. The real ones are thousands and thousands of dollars, and these were maybe a couple $100s each. And I use one of them predominantly for recording. I run my snare top mic through it, and I boost a little bit of 8K on the way in, so I have some extra snap on the way in. And I also boost a little bit of 100 hertz, so I can have a little bit more body. And I do that on the way into my DAW, into Pro Tools. And that allows a little bit more, of a crisp tone, and also a little bit more warmth on the recording, so that when I go to mix it, it's already closer to where I'm gonna want it. Pultecs are a great thing, and I wish I would have discovered them sooner. So hopefully you guys are out there, and this will pique your interest and get you to start playing with some Pultec EQs. Cool. Thank you so much.